Well, back in the shop today. It rained yesterday, and today it's misting, so it's kind of damp outside. Got a new light. This is one of those Costco LED lights that replaces the fluorescent lights. No changing the wire or anything. I think it's a lot brighter. So I've got set up here to make the vein. Right here, I've got the veining tool. It's a little V-groove. Pretty straightforward to set it up. I set the exact point on the seam. Did that on both ends. Clamped it up with my C-clamps. And ready to plug this in and make the first cut. And once again, I know I've said this before. The way I do things may not be the way you should do things. It's the way I feel comfortable with. But woodworking is an inherently dangerous sport. So be careful out there. This poplar didn't kick up as much sawdust as I thought it would. It's actually quite stringy. I went slow. Got a nice groove in there. Didn't touch the plywood, which wouldn't really make a difference if it did. So this is going to take minimal sanding. And now I'm going to do it on the footboard. I'm going to do the front and the back because I think both will be exposed. So we'll get started. Well, time to flip it over and do the other side. There's an old show on public television out of Canada called The Router Workshop, and those guys called this their fine adjustment tool. And it really works well. A couple of quick tips. It's important to orientate the router base the same way all the time, and make sure there's no sawdust accumulated on this straight edge here, because that will affect the quality of the cut as well. I did make a discovery on this. On the other side, I just went down using the router bit the correct way, counterclockwise. You always want to do it that way. Otherwise, the router bit may not follow and it'll catch the grain and take off on you. Don't ask me how I know that. But then I did a back stroke on it, being very careful to hold it tight against the fence. And that really cleaned up these V-grooves. And I wished I'd done that on the first 2 or 3 that I had done, because it's going to take away a lot of the sanding that I'll need to do on those. So it's time for the headboard to get the same treatment. There it is. I messed up. I've got I was not pressing hard enough on the backstroke here, and I've got a little bit of a problem. But I think I have a solution, so we'll get on it. Well, all you have to do is look around the shop here and you'll see some fine sawdust. I really count my blessings that this is a painted piece, because this would show up really awful on a stain piece. I'm going to use Instacure glue here. I've got a little bit of fine sawdust in the groove that I just created. Do that too. And then this is an accelerator which will help cure the glue quickly. I see some whiffs of smoke going off there. Now it heats up. So that is on there. I'll just sprinkle a little more sawdust into the groove, flatten it out, and because that accelerator is already on there, I'm going to have to add a lot more because you can see it's working through that other layer. About a minute to cure, seconds to cure. Alright, I think I'm ready for some sanding, and we'll see if we need to add more. This basically happened because I was lazy and was doing a backstroke on this groove. I mentioned earlier that it would be a lot easier to sand. When I went back to do the other part of the footboard, it wasn't that difficult to sand, so I think I'll count my losses here and just go in the direction the router wants to go instead of the direction the bit wants to take me. Still have a little void right there. That's what I was wanting to see. You can see those swirly, this poplar doesn't come off much in sawdust, but in streams like that. Just trying to add a little right there. And Brandon, Alyssa, you'll always know that there's a flaw in here. That's not perfect. You know, I could have made this whole thing out of plywood, and that probably would have been just fine, especially since it is painted, but I knew that you would see the grooves here, and if you want something out of plywood or MDF, all you have to do is go to one of the major manufacturers. I know I have to allow for wood movement here when I start putting on the headboard and footboard to the rails, but I think it'll be okay. That appears to be good. Let's give it an old reroute here and see how it looks. Touch it up here with a little bit of sandpaper. If there is any, I don't see it. Now the thing I'll have to do once this is painted is see if I can find it, and if I can find it, then I don't know what I'm gonna do, actually. Fortunately, it's going to be covered by a pillow or a mattress pad, but anyway, on to the rest of the project. I did pause to point out one thing. I added these weights right here because I was getting a little bit of a gap right along the seam there, and another mistake I could have made was having the base plate of that router go up under there. I think I had plenty of room. The base plate is about a ½ an inch thick, so I don't think it would have, but then that would have made another repair. So on to finishing it out. It was also getting too far to reach on that other side, This is a far reach too, but I think man, I didn't shave. Got lazy yesterday too and didn't shave. That does it. The V's grooves are cut. The veining, probably some people would call this. My router bit held up. This router bit is probably one of the first router bits I ever bought. Haven't used it much, but my first table was in 1975. And you may notice that I went over this line twice, and it's much cleaner. I'm 65 years old and still learning how to do stuff, so I didn't have to do the back thing on this and ruin it. I could do 2 passes. I didn't want to change the depth of the router bit, so the first one went real slow, and then the second one cleaned it up. Next thing to do then is to change router bits, get my template in here, and clean this top up so it's nice and smooth. And then we'll make the template for the footboard and go from there. That's the plan. All right, I've set up the last few minutes setting up the template. I've got it where I want it. I've got a pattern bit chucked up here in my router. Now, it's important to remember this router is going to go this direction. It's going to come into this grain this direction. If that's going to be okay on this downhill side, because this grain is running this way and it's going to be cutting this off. Now when I flip this over, that's not going to be the situation. I'm going to have to do some cuts, and in fact I'm going to do that on this side. I'm just going to take some relief cuts here because I don't want this thing to chip out. And this part's going to be covered. Probably a couple inches here is going to be covered by a molding, but there's no reason to let this thing chip out. So I'm going to get my safety gear on and do a cut. That came out pretty good. It's not nearly as smooth as the other side because of the grain orientation, but again, it's going to be covered by some molding, and it's smooth on both sides and exactly symmetrical now. Time for the footboard.